You've noticed we tend to devote ourselves to things that we love, get devoted to them, spend a lot of time with things we love. If you like something, if you really, really like it, you will generally devote yourself to it. Am I right? Years ago, well, actually back in the day, not years ago, that sounds too old. That sounds like I'm going back to Genesis. Back in the day, I spent some time at UBC. We lived in Vancouver, spent a lot of time at the UBC campus. And I was there for a number of years, and I was there to go to a seminary called Regent College and to learn about the Bible and theology, and I was devoted, very devoted. I played hockey twice a week, and I practiced twice a week. I was devoted to hockey. I loved hockey. I mean, I played so much hockey. You know, you love hockey when you play at 11 at night, and then sometimes even 2 in the morning is the only rink time. You get me? You know what I'm saying? I was devoted to hockey. Well, there's some question about what I should have been devoted to, but I was devoted to hockey because I loved it. The rest of the story is for another day. We devote ourselves to things we love. Our favorite activities, our family, our friends, favorite sports teams until they let us down. When we love something, we devote ourselves to it. So today is the first in this series, and we're looking at Acts chapter 2, and we encounter a church plant, as I would call it. And we see that they were devoted, very devoted, devoted to following Jesus and to each other. Today I want to ask this. I want to ask what that devotion looked like in the early church, and what can we learn today about that devotion from the early church, from that first church plant? And probably the first thing that we notice, we probably all notice and are familiar with the first and last section of that scripture. The first and last section, okay? I read them to you. The first one is, they devoted themselves, they're devoted to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to the breaking of bread and to prayer. And then this one tends to catch the eye, gets our attention. And the Lord added to the number daily those who were being saved. And maybe we wonder, just a little bit, maybe, what if we could be a church like that? What if we were devoted? Would the Lord add to our number daily? The first and last verses of this section sound pretty fantastic. It's a church devoted to something they love. Clearly they love God and they love each other. They're devoted. They devote themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, breaking of bread, and to prayer. And voila, look at that. The Lord added to their number daily. It's kind of like our people with strategic minds look at this and they think, can we create a system out of this maybe? Maybe we could do something with this. Like little strategic church planted wheels are starting to spin. We could even create a little formula, okay? This is how it works. T plus F plus C times P equals G. Okay, I'll tell you what that means. Teaching plus fellowship plus communion multiplied by prayer equals growth. Sounds like a book. Follow the numbers, they say. Follow the numbers. Get to the bottom of things. Follow the math. And look, a church plant that grows every day. It looks like a formula for church growth. And believe me, churches and pastors, professors, and books have been written on this subject and sold and bought and read. There's no shortage of systems and formulas that say, if you do this, you too can grow and have a church like that. Can't we just devote ourselves to these things and grow? Maybe. But let me tell you a bit more. This church plant was in fertile, rich soil. The soil of what God had been doing for centuries before with his people. It was not out of nothing. So Acts is very clearly about this. We need to pay attention to this if we want to see and know the connection between God creating a people for his name and what happens in this first church. In Israel, and then Jesus, and then this church, we have God doing something. He's creating people for his name. That's what it's about. It's a continuation of God's devotion to his people, to represent him in the world, and to share his way. There's lots of hints about this devotion here. Acts 1 starts with a connection to Jesus. It says, for 40 days, Jesus continued his message about the kingdom of God. So his apostles are waiting for something, and Jesus is here, and it says for 40 days. And if you were here, you go, wait a minute, 40 days? That sounds familiar. Does it sound familiar to you guys, 40 days at all? The Jews would go, I know what this means. 40 years, Moses was in the desert. 40 days, Jesus was in the desert. He's here 40 days from the crucifixion, from Passover to the Day of Atonement. So these are things that are meaning something. The Day of Atonement was the holiest day in Israel's liturgy. It's when the priest goes up the temple with offerings for all the people, enters the Holy of Holies. And he does that for the forgiveness of sins and reconciliation of the people with God. That's what happened in the Old Testament on this day, the Day of Atonement. That's when Jesus ascended. Ascension Day is the same day as this day. 40 days from Jesus to the crucifixion, his ascension, he went up with his offering for the sins and reconciliation of all the people. So we're supposed to see something, this connection with Jesus to the priesthood, to the Holy of Holies, and to a Jewish person there, it couldn't be more plain. They would catch this right away. So, do you guys notice that? Does it make sense now? Can you unsee it? Can you unsee it? No, I hope you can't. Every time you see that number 40, pay attention. The next holy day coming up was this. It was 50 days after Jesus' suffering. And they're preparing themselves for what's called the Feast of Weeks, or the Feast of Harvest. It's when they celebrate and give thanks to all the stuff that has come in. It's about the celebration of the law being given to Moses on Mount Sinai, the 10 Commandments, the stone. Moses came down. He had been with God in his presence. He comes back and sees the people. So this is 50 days from Passover. And all of this is celebrated at this feast and at this time because it represents this covenant that God has with his people, that he's creating a people for his name. That's what he's doing. And God was with them in tangible ways. And there were some signs of his presence that we need to pay attention to in the Old Testament. The signs were fire, wind, and God's speech to them. So this is what happens in Acts. After 50 days, they think they're celebrating the festival of the harvest, and something unexpected happens. There's a wind, there's tons of fire, and there's speech, and direct continuity to what was happening in the Old Testament. We call it Pentecost. And it's God's outpouring and empowering of his people. And what we learn is God is continuing to create a people for his name. So they were devoted to the apostles' teaching, fellowship, and prayer. And the church grew daily. I'll ask you a question to think about truthfully, okay? So be honest, don't give the right answer and keep it in your head because you might give the wrong answer. Is this a church you would want to belong to? Would you be devoted? Verses 44 to 46 give us a clear picture of what that devotion looks like. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to anyone and gave it to those who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. Okay, let me spell this out for you a bit, okay? This church that we all want to belong to. They met every single day in the temple, twice a day, for hours. They met in homes and ate together every single day for hours. They sold their private property and their possessions, and they pulled it together and gave it away. They didn't have their own stuff. It wasn't mine, it was ours. And these things are the details, the implications of what is meant that they were devoted to the teaching and fellowship and prayer of the apostles. This is what it looks like. This is what devotion looks like. I don't know that you can have devotion like that unless you have something else that's really strong driving that, right? Like the love that must have been present must have been tangible. I really struggled to figure out what to say about this because when I read it, I realized something. I wouldn't want to be part of this church. I didn't really like it. It's too much. Seriously, boundaries, like, come on. In my head, I was like, I should like this church. This is the church. This is what I should like. But I'm aware it makes me feel uncomfortable. To tell you the truth, when I read this about this church, I find myself not really wanting to be part of this church at all. And I wonder about them. It just doesn't sound very safe. It's over the top. I feel tired. I'm like, hello, boundaries. Like, don't you guys know about boundaries back then? Come on. It seems to me a church for extroverts, right? Extroverts would love this church. A church to go to if you want to get burnt out in ministry. A church of too much devotion. A church where they probably sold flowers at the airport as a fundraiser. Okay, too much? Okay, too much, right? They also probably sang Kumbaya around a fire. Too much? Church shopping nowadays, I also think this. If you were to go to find a church, would you go to a church like that? I mean, it'd be really interesting, right? You check their website and they have these requirements that you need to come every day. You need to sell all your stuff. You need to give it away. And you need to eat with people every single day. Who's signing up? Sounds kind of difficult to me. The studies nowadays say that most people want church a certain way in our culture. They want it to feel a certain way. They want it to do a certain thing. And devotion today seems to mean something much different than it did back then. Most people, according to studies, say that they want church to be a safe place for personal fulfillment, self-discovery, and the meeting of their unique needs. Feels like a better fit for me. So there's lots of research and trends around this and asking why do people go to church and what they think of it. 81% go to church to be closer to God. 70% so that the children will have a moral basis or moral foundation. 68% to become a better person, at least to try. And 76% to learn about the Bible and understand more. Those aren't bad things. I've encountered a lot of people that have decided that the church the way it is right now isn't really for them. Maybe you've heard this, but people say, I prefer the church of the wilderness. I'd rather be out by myself in the woods and join nature. That's where I meet God. That's the best for me. None of these things are bad. But they tell us something important. We have them upside down compared to the way the church in Acts had it. They were about thy kingdom come first. Their primary focus was creating people for God's name and participating in that. We seem to be about my kingdom come. The primary focus is God making my life better and my afterlife a bit more comfortable. This is the soil of the church in North America. It's our culture. It's an emphasis on personal autonomy and the view of being a Christian as primarily a personal journey about personal identity. What we love, what we are passionate about, is what we are devoted to. I think that's why all of this stuff in common, at least for me, feels uncomfortable. It rubs against who I am as a North American, as a Western person. It goes totally against all that, and it feels uncomfortable for me. Am I the only one? Okay, we're going to change our membership policy then. If I'm the only one, you have to be here every day. Okay? I won't go on. I'll get in trouble. What do we tend to be devoted to? Our individual journeys? Personal fulfillment? Our preferences? It seems like we're devoted to a teaching of the gospel that is small in devotion to one another and big in devotion to self. So I think this passage is really challenging. Because when devotion is shaped by personal fulfillment, what we love is ourselves. So the covenant community is seen as in Acts chapter 2, verses 42 to 47, is what it looks like when we take the command to love God and love others seriously. The greatest command. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. It seems like it's more about hands and feet than it is about bums in the seat. Do I think God could add to our numbers daily? Yes, I do. Absolutely, I do. But I find something else encouraging, okay? We don't need to be like this church today to be faithful and devoted. We don't need to be the same because our soil is different. But we do need to be devoted to the right things. And I think this passage is calling us to shift a little bit. It's an invitation to shift. To devote ourselves to what God is doing, what he's creating. A people for his name. Not a bunch of separate individuals. He's calling us to shift a bit. And if I could think of 3 practical things that would subvert, sabotage maybe, intentional sabotage, how we are as North Americans, here's 3 things that I thought about. We should work on perseverance in relationships. We should work on generosity and work on humility. Those are 3 things, there's probably more, that we could work on. Perseverance first, because when we feel like we want to give up on people, we don't, we stay. That's what the early church was like. It was full of perseverance. People didn't walk out on one another. Because it's easy to get annoyed by people, to be offended by something they say, to be rude to someone or that they're rude to you, to have disagreements. Perseverance means that you stay and you commit to stay and work through that. That's a detail the church today is weak in. Generosity. Knowing and believing that what I have actually is not my own, but it's God's and it's mine to share. I'm a steward of God's things. And giving and generosity and the practice of it is admitting it's God's, and it's seeing others' needs as more valuable than hoarding it for yourself. There's power in sharing. It transforms communities. The third one was humility. We, I, you are not the center of the universe. Hope that's not the first time you heard it. Not everything is about us as individuals. We need to work on giving others the spotlight and diminishing. There's no formula for church growth. It's not teaching plus fellowship plus communion times prayer equals growth. I was thinking about devotion in light of maybe my lack of devotion to hockey because I didn't really go anywhere. And too soon, but maybe the Blue Jays needed one more. Because, like they say 10,000. So maybe they were at 9,999. I don't know. But there's this thing, okay? Practice this stuff. When you're devoted, you do something 10,000 times. You heard of this? 10,000 times is the number. I mean, maybe if you're one short, it's okay. 10,000 times is the number. So Malcolm Gladwell was the one who popularized this. It didn't start with him. But when you're practicing, when you're devoted to something, you do it 10,000 times to be a master at that. 10,000 times. Start counting. It's a lot. You should be focused. You have to be diligent, purposeful, all that stuff. You do this with repetition and deliberateness because you love it. You're devoted to it 10,000 times. I wonder, okay, let's create a formula, okay? Perseverance, 10,000 times. Where are you guys at? Perseverance, 10,000 times. Let's practice it, okay? There's a lot, man, that's big. 1,000 times? Is that better? 100? Generosity. Humility. 10,000 times. I think maybe what would emerge might not be awful if we were devoted. I think it actually might be amazing. I think God could do something amazing in us in this soil that would look different than the soil of the early church. Imagine what God could do if we were devoted. I started this message feeling like I needed to make an apology. It's a strange way to end too, feeling like you need to make an apology. I hope it's not disappointing for you. The early church was a church that we look at. We make it nostalgic. But that makes us miss what we need to see. It's not nostalgia. It's calling us to something. I'm sorry and thank you.